Chapter 2577. Lan Ling Nua's expression turned cold. She gritted her teeth and said, "Do you dare to say that you didn't use every possible means to set up a series of plans against the War King Manor, the Miao Gu clan and the Northern Wave Imperial family?" Her fingers were curled up and her delicate body was shivering, but she still raised her head arrogantly. "Not only did you use your beauty to seduce the young sect master of the Qinyu sect, but you also seduced the young sect master of the Qinyu sect. You even made use of your own sister to seduce young Master Imo, all for the sake of getting Gui Wu to help you. Do you really think that no one knows what you've done?" Lan Ling Nua had been observing the relationship between the representatives of the Heavenly Academy, Ghost Martial Artist and Yi Luo. Then he discovered. From the beginning of the birthday banquet until now, Zhou Imo continued to play with the girl in his arms. His actions showed that he was doting on the girl in his arms. Lan Ling Nua immediately understood. Zhou Imo liked the girl called Kitty Li. Zhou Imo was also Gui Wu's only good friend. In other words, Yi Luo had used Kitty Li to seduce Zhou Imo. As a result, he managed to form a connection with the ghost martial artist. Otherwise, why would the martial arts fanatic Gui Wu, who was only interested in martial arts, come forward and stand up for a little slut? Lan Ling Nua's words immediately received everyone's approval. Kitty Li, who was confined in Zomo's arms, also realized that her and Zomo's playful behavior had caused Yiqing Luo to fall into a predicament. She immediately struggled to break free from Zomo's embrace. Zomo's arms tightened even more. His long and narrow almond-shaped eyes seemed to be dotted with thousands of stars. He bowed his head, his thin lips lightly touching Kitty Li's ear. "Little wild cat, you ran down from my arms in such a hurry, didn't you confirm that woman's words?" Kitty Li stopped struggling. "Don't worry, don't you believe in little Qing Luo's ability? Let's just sit and watch the show." Zhou Imo looked at the girl in his arms. Her bright eyes were sparkling and she looked extremely cute. He couldn't help but kiss her eyes. Kitty Li's body trembled slightly. She immediately raised her hand and hammered Zomo's chest. Zhou Imo buried his head in her neck and laughed softly. His chest heaved up and down and his devilishly charming face was full of smiles. The interaction between the two was obviously not affected by Lan Ling Nua's words. It didn't seem like it either. The feeling of Kitty Li seducing Zhou Imo. Lan Ling Nua gritted her teeth in anger. "You still want to deny it?" "Deny." Yiqing Luo's brows rose, the arc of her charming eyes deepened as she teased. "I don't even put you scums in my eyes, do I need to waste time to plot against you?" She was smiling. Her pair of charming eyes were like stars, flickering with a dazzling luster. His words were filled with mockery. "To be honest, if I wanted the Northern Billow Imperial family to change hands, it would be a trivial matter." Yiqing Luo's words were absolutely not to put on airs. Not to mention the fact that she was a member of the World Mercenary Group, just the authority that she had obtained from the General Hospital. On top of that, Sovereign Bei Lon had courted death himself today. He borrowed the authority of the headquarters to gather the forces of all the academies in the Northern Wave continent and casually exerted pressure. How long could the Northern Wave Imperial family last? If it took more than 3 days, it would be considered her loss. Yiqing Luo's extremely arrogant words had completely infuriated Xiaji. "Little silly lass, who gave you the guts to insult the royal family? You want to stir up trouble in front of me? I'm going to take your life." His expression sunk as he flew into a rage. His figure moved as he struck his palm towards Yiqing Luo's direction. As he waved his palm, the earth shook and the mountains shook. A strong, profound energy surged downwards. No one in the first row moved. Apparently no one intended to save Yi Luo. Seeing that, Xiaji's eyes turned sharp as his eyes were filled with wanton murderous intent. Looked like Gui Wu indeed didn't treat Yi Luo seriously. Then he would take this chance to kill her. This damned slut, how dare she humiliate him time and time again. Just as Xiaji's palm wind was about to land on Yiqing Luo. Suddenly, a surge of profound energy that was like a surging tide directly struck Xiaji's palm wind. In an instant, a terrifying and powerful pressure filled the entire hall. The guests present felt their hearts jolting fiercely. Chapter 2578. Xiaji's body was thrown onto the ground by that majestic energy. He rolled several rounds. With a wah sound, he spat out a large mouthful of blood, staining his dragon robe red. He propped himself up as he stared weakly in front. A whirlwind brushed past his cheek. Xiaji's eyes only managed to catch a glimpse of brilliant purple color. Ah! The surrounding guests cried out in shock as they couldn't help but stood up as they looked ahead in shock. Yiqing Luo had already thought of a way to deal with Xiaji's palm strike. But before she could make a move, he felt a familiar aura seeping into his nose. Her petite body suddenly stiffened. Her eyes stared ahead in a daze. The man was dressed in a billowing purple robe, and as he walked, he drew an eerie and piercingly cold arc. His eyes stared straight at Yiqing Luo. His obsidian-like peach blossom eyes seemed to be embellished with resplendent starlight, dazzling Yiqing Luo's eyes. That face was as peerless as ever. With just a glance, she felt as if she was attracted by something, wanting to drown in his beauty. Yiqing Luo's throat was a little dry. Her pink lips trembled as her eyes gazed in delight at the man who was walking over. Zhou Xian. He was back. Was it his original self? Who was back? The man's footsteps were heavy and slow as he emitted a majestic and vigorous aura, oppressing the surrounding crowd in an overbearing manner. Until he stood in front of Yiqing Luo. His long arms stretched out as he hugged Yiqing Luo's petite body tightly. His strength was extremely strong. As though he wanted to rub her into his body. It was so big that Yiqing Luo found it hard to breathe. However, there was a smile on her face, and a thin layer of mist appeared on her beautiful eyes that were gleaming with light. The familiar sandalwood scent lingered around her nose. The familiar warmth enveloped everything about her. It was Zhou Xian. Zhou Xian was back. Overlord. It's the Overlord. Why would the Overlord? Why would he be here? It's really the Overlord. Absolutely. Absolutely. It can't be fake. The surrounding guests started to stand up as they shouted excitedly. They couldn't contain their excitement. Lord Dizun actually came to attend the Qingyue sect leader's birthday banquet. Compared to Gui Wu, this Dizun was even more mysterious and unpredictable. Wait, what is the relationship between His Majesty and Lady Yi? Some of the guests looked in disbelief at Zhou Xian, who was hugging Yiqing Luo tightly in his arms. There was a faint guess in his heart, but he didn't dare to say it out. The other guests were also shocked. They could no longer remain calm. Dizun. Xiaji held his chest and his face was ashen. Xia Lingling and Lan Ling Nuo were so shocked that they jumped up from the ground. Their fingers trembled as they pointed at the two people who were tightly hugging each other. They could not believe what they were seeing. Dizun and that bitchy Luo? What was going on? How could Yi Luo be related to the Overlord? Furthermore, their relationship was clearly not ordinary. Lan Ling Nuo was the most shocked as her breathing was so hurried that she almost couldn't catch her breath. Impossible. How could the Overlord possibly be with that slut Yi Luo? He isn't, not with that slut Yiqing Luo. Her voice abruptly stopped. Yi Luo? Yiqing Luo? Zhou Xian. Could it be? Chapter 2579. Overlord. Xia Lingling bellowed unwillingly. She pushed away Lan Ling Nuo's stiff hand and rushed forward a few steps, pointing at Yiqing Luo. Her eyes were filled with hatred. Overlord, you must have been cheated by this woman. She is a fickle slut. Zhou Xian raised his brows, his narrow peach blossom eyes curved into a treacherous cold arc. Seeing Zhou Xian's reply, Xia Lingling's heart was thumping non-stop. She couldn't suppress the smile on her lips. Her clenched fists were clenched in agitation. That slut, she seduced Master Gui Wu, and even seduced the young matriarch of Qingyue sect in public. Xia Lingling's tone was filled with hatred. When Yin Yanxiu heard this, his face instantly turned pale. What nonsense are you talking about? The person in front of him was the Legend of Nirvana Realm, the Legend of Nirvana Realm. Looking at the atmosphere between Yi Luo and the Overlord, it was obviously the kind of relationship between a man and a woman. Said Yi Luo seduced him? Wasn't that the same as saying he and the Overlord were fighting over a woman? Even if he really secretly admired Yi Luo. Now the Overlord was standing here. How would he have the guts to talk about admiration? Zhou Xian's dark red thin lips slightly rose. His slender fingers gently hooked Yiqing Luo's chin. In his peach blossom eyes, there seemed to be circles of whirlpools, captivating one's soul, making one unable to escape. Seduced the young matriarch? He was obviously smiling, but the words he spat out were filled with an eerie chill. Even Yiqing Luo couldn't help but feel a chill down her spine, unable to maintain the smile on her face. Xia Lingling's eyes lit up, wild with joy, thinking that she had provoked the relationship between the overlord and Yi Luo. She was getting more and more delighted and excited. Anyway, the royal family had already cut off all contact with Qinyu sect. She didn't care about offending Qinyu sect. Immediately, she looked at Xianxia with a cold smile. Her eyes no longer had any charming charm. If she hadn't seduced you, how could you possibly invite her to the birthday banquet personally? Xianxia, don't tell me that you have no improper thoughts towards Yi Luo. Xianxia opened his mouth to retort. But when he heard Xia Lingling's last sentence, he couldn't refute it no matter what. It was this moment of hesitation. This made Xia Lingling even more certain that her guess was correct. Overlord, this is the woman you are protecting. With such a good backer like you, she's still flirting around. She's a bitch by nature. But before he could finish his sentence, Xia Lingling only felt a strong gust of wind blowing towards her. Then he felt a sharp pain on his face. He screamed in pain. Just as he opened his eyes, before he could even see what was happening in front of him clearly, Zhou Xian's eyes widened. Her chin seemed to have been pierced by something. With a cautious sound, it was unloaded. Ah dash. Xia Lingling let out a blood-curdling scream. This sound was extremely short and it stopped abruptly. It was as if something had suddenly cut off his voice. He could not make any sound at all. At the same time, the surrounding guests started to draw in cold breaths. Their faces were filled with shock as their eyes widened in shock. They saw it with their own eyes. At the moment when Xia Lingling screamed, a burst of profound energy turned into a sharp wind blade directly, cutting off Xia Lingling's tongue. Blood spurted onto the ground. Chapter 2580. Lingling. Xiaji regained his senses from the shock as he looked at Xia Lingling, who was covered in blood and lying on the ground, as he went into a daze once again. His eyes were bloodshot and the arm which stretched out towards Xia Lingling started to bulge with green veins. Xia Lingling was his sister. The only proof left behind. Because of him, his sister, his brother-in-law, all died a violent death in order to let him sit firmly on the North Wave Monarch's position. Because he had let his sister down. He had always indulged this niece of his and doted on her very much. Now, seeing Xia Lingling's tongue being cut off and lying on the ground covered in blood, this made him recall several years ago when his sister was also lying on the ground covered in blood. How dare you talk about this lord's woman? Dmo Xian gave a cold smile as there wasn't any tenderness and sweetness in his eyes when he was facing Yiqing Luo. That pair of eyes which seemed to be blooming with peach blossoms. A stretch of icy cold mixed with bloodthirsty malevolence. This is just a small lesson. Xiaji was filled with grief and indignation as he wanted to seek justice for Xia Lingling, but under this icy cold gaze, it slowly subsided. His entire body stiffened as he looked at the young lady who was nestled in Dmo Xian's arms. The expression on his face started to distort bit by bit. No wonder. This Yi Luo was so arrogant and unrestrained, as though nothing was in his eyes. No wonder. Even Gui Wu and Zoemo would stand on her side. No wonder. She had the real heaven-recovering serene pill on her. Because this Yi Luo was the Overlord's man. She and the Overlord had an intimate relationship. Since when did the Overlord have such a woman who could get close to him appeared by his side? Xiaji still remembered it clearly. When Dmo Xian appeared, he even said one sentence. Yiqing Luo's guts was given by him. Xiaji suddenly felt his legs turning into jelly as he half knelt on the ground as his face turned deathly pale. Finished. Everything was finished. Offended the Overlord. Offended the Imperial Palace. He had no chance to turn the tables. No wonder Yi Luo made a solemn vow earlier. It was just a matter of minutes for her to change the ruler. With the Overlord as her backing, she wanted to destroy the entire North Wave continent. No one could resist. Even this lord can't bear to hurt the person. How dare you hurt her? Dmo Xian's eyes were dark and gloomy. All of you have to pay the price. When his words fell, Dmo Xian glanced sideways. His gaze was fixated on Yiqing Luo without blinking. His deep peach blossom eyes flashed with a luster that made Yiqing Luo blush. He lowered his head and kissed her earlobe. His deep and mellow voice floated into her ears. She felt an indescribable itch all over her body from her bones to her bones. "I'll deal with you later." As soon as he finished speaking, his figure instantly left Yiqing Luo's side. His 5 fingers flew straight in the direction of Xiaji. Xiaji let out a short exclamation. Zhou Xian gripped her neck tightly. His eyes were cold as he slowly walked past Lanling Nuo and Yuan Zhan, as well as the onlookers. "The Overlord. We didn't do anything, it's the North Wave Monarch. North Wave royal family's people have been targeting." Right. We're just passers-by attending Sect Master Yin's birthday banquet." When the guests were swept by him, their legs couldn't help but turn to jelly. Chapter 2581. Xiaji struggled desperately. The feeling of suffocation in his neck made his entire face turn red, and his eyes kept bulging out. From Zhou Xian's body, that overbearing oppressive force made his chest felt as though it was being squeezed by something. He was afraid. He panicked, wanting to escape from Zhou Xian's boundary. However, the 5 fingers on his neck were tightly clasped around his neck. He had no strength to struggle at all. Yuan Zhan and Lanling Nuo were so scared that their faces turned pale. His entire body was trembling non-stop. Dizun could even kill Monarch Beilon. Then, wouldn't it be even easier to kill them? "What are you waiting for? Hurry up and save Lord Beilon. Don't tell me you want to see your king die." Lanling Nuo turned her head and saw the Imperial Guards at the side. She hurriedly shouted at them. The royal guards looked at Zhou Xian and each and every one of them were scared witless, so how would they dare to save their own monarch? Furthermore, whether or not he could continue to be a monarch was a problem. "Oh," Xiaji's painful voice once again entered Lanling Nuo's ears. Xiaji's face was already extremely distorted. It was a picture of death. Then he looked at Xia Lingling, who was still twitching on the ground and had lost her tongue. Lanling Nuo's expression became increasingly unsightly. If her guess was right, the Overlord would definitely stand on Yiqing Luo's side. Kill everyone who had made Yiqing Luo unhappy. None of them could escape. Lanling Nuo's eyes flashed and she suddenly grabbed Yuan Zhan's arm. With a grave expression she said, "Since Lord Dizun isn't going to let any of us go, in order to survive, we can only rely on ourselves." Yuan Zhan's body turned cold and stiff due to the fear of Zhou Xian. When he heard Lanling Nuo's words, he only turned his head stiffly. His face was still filled with unconcealable fear. Lanling Nuo's eyes flickered with a piercingly cold light. From the corner of his eyes he glanced unnoticeably towards Yiqing Luo's direction. Yuan Zhan's pupils shrank as he grabbed Lanling Nuo's hand. Their eyes met. He could see the ruthlessness in the other party's eyes. After that, the two of them swiftly separated. One left and one right, speedily flying towards Yiqing Luo's direction. "Little bitch. Even if I die, I'll drag you down with me to hell." Yuan Zhan growled in anger. His eyes were filled with crazed killing intent. His palm was like an eagle's claw, grabbing towards Yiqing Luo's face. It seemed like he was ready to cut off all means of retreat. He had offended Dizun. Either way he would die. Since Dizun thinks so highly of this girl, he would use this girl to threaten Dizun. If he could survive, then everyone would be happy. If he could not survive, he also wanted to kill this bitch who destroyed his War King's mansion and disturbed his plans. To tell the truth, Yuan Zhan and Lanling Nuo's speed towards Yiqing Luo wasn't considered to be very fast. However, Zhou Xian was still holding onto Xiaji's neck. His face was devilishly charming and cold. Gui Wu, Heavenly Academy's representative, 3,000 peach blossoms and the rest were also sitting motionless. Yuan Zhan's heart was filled with an inexplicable feeling of unease. But the arrow was knocked. He had no other way out. Yuan Zhan made up his mind. His eyes were filled with murderous intent as he unleashed his dark force. It had turned into a sharp blade. Go to hell. Chapter 2582. The young lady's lips curled into a faint smile. Facing the oncoming profound energy, the numerous blades formed from profound energy didn't seem to be bothered at all. A pair of charming eyes met Yuan Zhan's eyes with a faint smile. Just as Yuan Zhan's attack was about to land, the young lady's sweet laughter rang out once again, as melodious as a silver bell. "Don't worry, I will send both of you to hell together." Her clear laughter was like a clear spring, extremely pleasing to the ears. But in Yuan Zhan's ears, it was like a curse that hastened his death. Yiqing Luo didn't give Yuan Zhan any chance to retreat. Her right hand lifted up gently. A red feather fan that was like a raging flame appeared on her slender fair fingertips. Devour, glower flame fan. Lan Ling Nua's last trace of luck completely dissipated the moment the glower flame fan appeared. Her footsteps, which were closing in on Yiqing Luo, silently halted. Her body flashed and actually escaped from Yiqing Luo's attack range. Yuan Zhan was left alone there. Zhou Xian's woman owned the glower flame fan, had a close relationship with the Heavenly Academy's students. Yi Luo. Ting Luo. Other than that, there was no one else. This ordinary-looking slut was Yiqing Luo. Princess Donglan trying to escape? A ghostly voice followed her ears like a shadow. Lan Ling Nua's heart was filled with shock and astonishment. At this moment, the moment the voice rang, it turned into endless fear. A red figure like a raging flame flew past. Following closely, a strong force blocked Lan Ling Nua's path. He forcefully pulled her back a few steps. Why is Princess Donglan running? Aren't you secretly misleading her happily? Let's continue now. Yiqing Luo's fingers shook, the feather fan opened and instantly closed, drawing out numerous sharp wind blades. Swish, 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 a few tearing sounds were heard. Lan Ling Nua only felt a chill. Numerous pieces of white muslin floated out from under that loose brocade robe. She screamed and immediately wrapped the brocade robe tightly. She could clearly feel herself under the brocade robe. Not a single strand of hair. The surrounding guests also saw the feather-like white gauze fluttering down. Strand by strand they scattered on the ground. All of them had lustful gazes as they looked greedily in Lan Ling Nua's direction. Although Yin Yanxiu's loose robe covered her petite figure, she was still able to see him. But everyone knew, at this moment, apart from the embroidered robe on Lan Ling Nua's body, there was nothing else on her body. There was nothing else. Just imagining it made countless men smile sinisterly. Ah! Lan Ling Nua was so embarrassed that her ears turned red. She screamed and hugged herself. Yuan Zhan could only feel his blood freezing in his body. He breathed with difficulty bit by bit. Earlier, Yiqing Luo's gaze made him feel as though he was in an ice house. His mind, consciousness, and rationality froze in an instant. It was a fan that looked like a flame. A few exhibition rooms. Then a cluster of flames like an excited fire elf cut through his chest and penetrated his flesh and bones. Pain, the excruciating pain made him unable to stand straight. His huge body staggered as he half knelt on the ground. Like a huge mountain collapsing with a loud bang. Following that, he heard Lan Ling Nua's scream. He raised his eyes and saw Lan Ling Nua frantically wrapping herself with her clothes, sitting on the ground in a sorry state. Chapter 2583. Yuan Zhan's pupils dilated bit by bit. Following that, he slowly shifted his focus to that young lady with a light smile. He knew that Yi Luo was very powerful. But he had not expected Yi Luo to be so powerful to this extent. He totally didn't see her strike clearly. He and Lan Ling Nua had no leeway to retaliate. No wonder the Overlord was so concerned about Yi Luo. But after he made his move, she couldn't even be bothered to look at him. He should have thought of it. A woman who could stand on the Overlord. How could she be so easily suppressed by others? This scene also caused the surrounding guests to be in disbelief. They couldn't believe it at all. The seemingly harmless young lady was able to make the generals who had been on the battlefield for many years, as well as the East Lan princess, admit defeat with a snap of her fingers. Miao Yixiong and Miao Rongrong, who were far away in the crowd, exchanged glances with each other with a pale face. They were secretly rejoicing. Earlier, in order to get the antidote from Yiqing Luo, they resolutely chose to speak up for Yiqing Luo. Otherwise, the outcome of the North Lan royal family. It would be the outcome of their Gu poison family. Now, who dared to say that Yiqing Luo was another country's spy? Who dared to say that Yiqing Luo was plotting against the top forces in the North Lan continent, trying to break down the various forces in the North Lan continent? This was all bullshit. The way the crowd looked at Yiqing Luo no longer had any other emotions. They were all fawning over him and filled with respect. Zhou Xian took a look at the fainted Xiaji as though he was throwing rubbish as he casually threw him out. After that he wiped his hands fiercely and walked towards Yiqing Luo without turning his head back. The overlord who was filled with a baleful aura earlier was like the king of Hades from hell. The moment his gaze met Yiqing Luo, Zhou Xian's cold expression softened in an instant. All the coldness gradually melted. His lips curled upwards, the tenderness between his brows kept blossoming. Done playing? He had a unique magnetic voice as he asked in a low voice. Yiqing Luo's arms opened wide, hugging Zhou Xian's neck, throwing her petite body completely into his arms. Then she raised her little face in front of his chest. The girl hooked her arms around his neck and narrowed her eyes. She stared at his face with a smile and said, "I've played enough." Zhou Xian's arm exerted a little more strength. The young girl was already in his arms. With steady steps he slowly walked towards the first row of seats. Yiqing Luo giggled as she circled her arms around his neck, shaking her legs in his arms like a mischievous child. The joy and sweetness between her brows were obvious. In the crook of the man's arm, the girl's delicate body was steadily supported. She did not feel the slightest danger. All the way until he reached Gui Wu's side. Gui Wu took the initiative to stand up before moving a seat away from Zhou Mo. He gave up the seat beside Yiqing Luo to Zhou Xian. Then Zhou Xian directly carried Yiqing Luo and sat down. His hands moved to her slender waist and refused to let go. Yiqing Luo calmly nestled in Zhou Xian's arms. The gazes of the people around her were not important to her. Perhaps in the eyes of other women reputation was more important. But she had already set her sights on Zhou Xian. Even though they hadn't gotten married yet. But getting married was merely a matter of time. Love and whatnot should be openly shown out. Chapter 2584. Yin Qinghao and Wu Yu stood by the table filled with shock and astonishment. It was until Yiqing Luo called out to him that Yin Qinghao shifted his gaze away from the overlord in a daze. Carry him down. He was stunned as he suddenly understood the meaning of Yiqing Luo's words. Right. Carry him down. His eyes stared intently at Yiqing Luo, unable to suppress the agitation in his heart. From his own son's mouth he knew that this young lady's identity was not simple. Adding on to the fact that her relationship with Gui Wu was not bad. He had always treated her with courtesy. He had not expected. She was actually the overlord's woman. Because of her, Gui Wu had personally attended his birthday banquet. Because of her, the overlord was here. His Qingyue clan. This birthday banquet, wouldn't it be famous throughout the entire Nirvana realm? A row of Qingyue clan's guards carried the bunch of royal family's people who were lying on the ground down. The spurting blood on the ground was also cleaned up. The entire main hall was still in dead silence. No one dared to speak first to break the silence. Yiqing Luo looked at Yin Qinghao's hesitant and uneasy look. She couldn't help but curse silently in her heart. Just how respectable was this Zhou Xian's status in the Nirvana realm? Even the sect master Yin Qinghao was so anxious and agitated. She couldn't help but laugh as she eased the atmosphere. Sect master Yin and everyone, please don't mind, just treat him as if he doesn't exist. This man's temper is very good, no need to be anxious. As she was saying that, she propped herself up. Stretching out both her hands, she pinched Zhou Xian's face fiercely. This action nearly caused the surrounding guests to fall from their seats. Their eyes widened as they looked anxiously at Zhou Xian. That face which was being pinched by the little woman's hands. They thought that the overlord would fly into a rage and throw the person in his arms out. After all, to pinch a man's face in front of so many people. This was not only improper. It was trampling on the overlord's dignity. However, they only saw the doting and gentle look in Dizun's eyes. He did not stop the girl in his arms from touching his face. See, I've already said that his temper is very good. Just carry on with the birthday banquet, don't mind it too much. Yiqing Luo tugged his lips, making him reveal a smile. Everyone. His forehead was covered in cold sweat. His mouth was full of dog food. Okay, they already knew. In Dizun's heart, the lady named Yi Luo was a special existence. The overlord doted on her to the core. Of course, the overlord would be nice to her. But they weren't her. Continue to celebrate Sect Master Yin's birthday as if Dizun doesn't exist? They really couldn't do it. Just the thought of sitting in the same place as Dizun and breathing the same air was enough to make one's heart tremble. Their legs went soft and they were so nervous that they couldn't even speak. Cough, cough, cough. Yin Qinghao looked at the crowd's astonished, shocked, envious and various expressions. He cleared his throat and withstood the pressure. Since Miss Yi has already said so, then let's carry on as usual. If during this period the Overlord has anything that you don't like, just let me know and I will definitely do my best. After he finished his words, he looked at Zhou Xian anxiously. Zhou Xian lowered his head as he gazed at the person in his arms, not saying a word, displaying his nobility and aloofness to the extreme. Yiqing Luo rolled her eyes as she tugged at his robes. Chapter 2585. Wife, wife, slave. In everyone's mind these two words appeared at the same time. Immediately they all looked towards the Overlord. That look of pampering. That look of unconditional promise to any of Yiqing Luo's conditions. The Overlord was definitely a wife-slave. Since the Overlord had already spoken. Yin Qinghao then carefully let the birthday banquet continue. But everyone was still unable to be as comfortable as before. Yiqing Luo didn't care whether those people were comfortable or not. Her heart was filled with the joy of Zhou Xian returning to her side. Moreover, he had appeared in front of her like a god, protecting her and protecting her. Her young lady's heart was swelling. She sat up and clung to his chest. She raised her head and smiled. "Ah Xian, you're giving me so much face." Zhou Xian lowered his head, his dark eyes were like a lake, gazing deeply at her smiling face. "So where's the reward?" Yiqing Luo's long and narrow eyes curved deeper. She hooked Zhou Xian's neck with one hand. She generously offered her pink lips to him. Zhou Xian's eyes dimmed as his arms suddenly increased the strength. Yiqing Luo's petite body, almost without any gap, clung tightly to the man's burning hot body. The scorching heat through the clothes seemed to be burning her skin. Yiqing Luo could even feel it clearly. The man's change. Her cheeks were slightly stained with a shade of red. Her little hand grabbed his collar, trying to push him away. But Zhou Xian kissed her even deeper. At the other end of the seat, a handsome gentleman dressed in a bamboo-colored brocade robe crushed the wine glass in his hand. A pair of deep and gentle eyes seemed to be covered with a thin layer of mist. Young matriarch. Great Elder Gu heard the sound of the wine glass shattering and jumped in shock. Gu Jingyu's gaze looked straight ahead, deeply hugging and kissing, as if there were only the two of them in the world. His pupils contracted bit by bit. Great Elder Gu called out a few times, but didn't get any response from Gu Jingyu. Looking at Gu Jingyu's palm, it was covered with blood after the porcelain was pierced. He immediately grabbed Gu Jingyu's hand. "Young matriarch." Gu Jingyu's eyes were still a little dazed. He glanced at Grand Elder Gu in a daze, then chuckled and shifted his gaze back to the girl who was smiling like a flower not far away. His heart felt as if it had been ruthlessly stabbed by something. It was so painful that he couldn't even feel the stinging pain of his palm being pierced by porcelain. So, her fiancé was Dizun, the Overlord who was regarded as a myth and a legend by everyone. If it was someone else, he might even be able to openly declare war on her fiancé. He had snatched Yi Luo away in broad daylight. But, that fiancé, that man, was the Overlord. He had no chance of winning. They didn't even have the qualifications to fight for it. Just as he was feeling sentimental, Gu Jingyu suddenly felt a gust of cold wind pour into his body through his collar. He shuddered. An indescribable chill invaded his entire being. Gu Jingyu wanted to search for the source of the cold air. That chill, however, was cut off. "Alright, stop fooling around." Yiqing Luo buried her head in Zhou Xian's arms. Although she didn't care about other people's gazes. But no matter what, she was still a girl. In front of so many people, kissing, hugging and raising up high, she could accept it. But the kiss was inseparable and she was about to lose control from his teasing. Chapter 2586. Zhou Xian chuckled. His chest rose and fell, shaking her face. The next moment, the man's slender fingers gently caressed her cheek. 5 fingers slightly closed. She lifted her blushing face slightly. For eyes met. Under the deep gaze of those shimmering peach blossom eyes, Yiqing Luo suddenly felt her face heating up. Damn it! Was it because she hadn't seen Ah Xian for a long time? It was just a casual glance. It was enough to flirt with her so much. Yiqing Luo expressed that as the queen she must not be afraid at this moment. She raised her hands and was about to hug Demo Xian's neck to launch a counterattack. Her hands were held firmly in Demo Xian's palms. Yiqing Luo couldn't struggle and simply fell into his arms, lifting her eyelids to glare at him. He was slightly startled by what he saw. Demo Xian's eyes were filled with complex emotions that she couldn't understand. His brows were filled with a smile, but it wasn't a deep smile. Xian, why? She hadn't finished her question. But her lips were gently pressed by the man's slender fingers. When I wasn't around, how many rotten peach blossoms did you attract? His eyes flickered, his dark red thin lips raised into an extremely shallow arc. But Yiqing Luo could clearly feel the jealousy under Demo Xian's smile. Her man could really knock over the vinegar jar anytime and anywhere. If you can't explain clearly, I'll deal with you ruthlessly. Demo Xian got close to her face. The arc on his lips added a hint of evil. Yiqing Luo. Was he looking for an excuse to do something improper to her? But looking at Demo Xian's serious expression, Yiqing Luo still explained obediently, Xianxia only saw Gui Wu's invitation and Gui Wu and I were in the same carriage, so when he picked Gui Wu up he also picked me up. Demo Xian raised his brows. That's it. What else can there be? Yiqing Luo pursed her lips. Looking at Demo Xian's disbelieving expression, she frowned slightly. That's it? Demo Xian inched closer, until her pupils were filled with his handsome and elegant face, before he finally stopped. Yiqing Luo's eyes were filled with the man's incomparably handsome face. That pair of obsidian-like peach blossom eyes gleamed, causing her heart to beat wildly. What else do you want? Yiqing Luo's cheeks turned slightly red from his stare. She wanted to shift her body away, but Demo Xian's grip tightened. He narrowed his peach blossom eyes, and the flowing light in his eyes stirred in a dark and mysterious way. His scorching gaze made Yiqing Luo's heart beat wildly, uncontrollably. It was clear that if she didn't explain herself clearly, she wouldn't be able to leave. She gritted her teeth and glared at him bashfully. With such an outstanding man like you by my side, good-looking, powerful, and giving me a sense of security, being able to ascend to the heavens and dive into the earth, capable of doing anything, do you think I'd be interested in any other lousy suitors? A flurry of praises successfully pleased Demo Xian. It also greatly satisfied a certain man's self-esteem. The dark clouds on the face with the strange smile finally dispersed, revealing a satisfied smile. He let go of her face, put his arms around her waist and leaned back slightly. His gaze seemed to be looking towards a certain direction. His eyes were filled with complacency and provocation. Yiqing Luo was puzzled and was about to follow Demo Xian's gaze. But the man suddenly straightened his body. Her face bumped against his chest. The man's low and hoarse voice rang beside her ears. I want to eat something. Chapter 2587. Feed me. The man raised an arm and propped it on the table as he looked at her lazily. Yiqing Luo blushed. Eat it yourself if you want. Shouldn't he be the one feeding her? Demo Xian's fingers on her waist moved unintentionally as he said lazily, It's especially delicious if you feed me. Clearly it was just a flat tone saying this sentence. But when Yiqing Luo heard it, it somehow felt a sense of teasing. She didn't know if she was thinking too much. The word eat from Demo Xian's mouth somehow felt that he wasn't talking about eating things, especially when the man's fingers caressed her waist. Yiqing Luo expressed her surrender as she reached out for the exquisite pastries on the table and grabbed a piece, stuffing it into Demo Xian's mouth. Stuffing action was absolutely not gentle. On the contrary, it was extremely rude. While stuffing, she stared at him with a pair of charming eyes, as if she was saying angrily, eat you to death. That look was extremely adorable. Demo Xian smiled as he allowed Yiqing Luo to stuff that piece of pastry into his mouth. The fragrant and sweet smell of the pastry seeped into his nose. It was also mixed with a young lady's fragrance. Looking at Yiqing Luo's adorable expression, Demo Xian's eyes suddenly flashed. Just as Yiqing Luo was about to retract her hand, he suddenly opened his mouth and gently bit the young lady's delicate fingers. The two of them were very close. Demo Xian could clearly feel the petite body of the person in his arms trembling slightly. A teasing smile flashed past his eyes as the tip of his tongue stuck out and swept over her fingers. Ah! Yiqing Luo's cheeks suddenly turned crimson red as she immediately withdrew her hand and stared at him. Ah, Xian. Can you be a little more serious? If I'm not serious, the current you would no longer have the energy to stare at me. Dmo Xian's eyes curved as he smiled. His low and hoarse voice was full of seductive charm. Yiqing Luo's face turned even redder. She expressed that she really couldn't win against this deranged beast in words. Driving when she wasn't paying attention. Flirting when she wasn't paying attention. Could they still have a pleasant, normal conversation? She was so embarrassed that she flew into a rage. She lowered her head and looked at the residue on her fingers. She could still feel the man's warm touch on them. Her face turned even redder. Lowering her head, she refused to pay any attention to Dmo Xian. Looking at the person in his arms, he was extremely shy. Dmo Xian laughed as he hugged her body tightly. Out of the corner of his eye, he glanced at a certain place. That was the place where the Wind Valley sect represented. The person he was looking at was the young master of the Wind Valley sect, Gu Jingyu. The corner of his mouth curled into a cold smirk. His perceptive ability was very high. As soon as he entered the banquet, he felt a gaze staring at him from the moment he appeared. That gaze was filled with intense hostility. Following that, he looked at Gu Jingyu's gaze when he looked at Yiqing Luo. What else did Dmo Xian not understand? Has Sha wanted his woman? His little Luo? Or would only belong to him? Let that rotten peach blossom watch him and his little Luo were being so lovey-dovey. Dmo Xian hid the chilly provocation in his eyes. When he looked at Yiqing Luo again, it was filled with deep affection. Wind Valley sect's representative seat. Gu Jingyu sat stiffly on the ground. His eyes widened in disbelief. On a closer look, he could see that his body was trembling continuously. He saw the provocative gaze from the overlord. Chapter 2588. So, Dmo Xian did it on purpose to let him see the sweetness between him and Yi Luo. To make him give up completely? He had to admit it. When he saw Yi Luo nestling in Dmo Xian's arms, feeding him pastries personally and playing with him, his heart felt a sharp pain as if it was stabbed by a sharp knife, but at the same time he was very clear that there was no possibility between him and Yi Luo. Yi Luo was only like a real woman in front of Dmo Xian. He saw Yi Luo's lips, a sincere smile. He saw Yi Luo's face, a blissful and sweet expression. He saw Yi Luo like an ordinary young lady, snuggling in her lover's arms, shy and playful. He saw all of these no matter how hard he tried, and absolutely could not see such an expression on Yi Luo's face. He still remembered. When they were in Bu family village, Elder T misunderstood that they were a young couple. Misunderstood that they were going to Saint Spring to pray for children. She had never been shy before. But in Dmo Xian's arms she would reveal a real woman's shy expression. Gu Jingyu helplessly clenched his fists tightly. After that he shut his eyes helplessly. Really? Give up? Give up on him? Till now, after so much difficulty, he finally had a change of heart? Young sect master, don't tell me that towards that lady. Great Elder Gu, who was beside him, had been paying attention to Gu Jingyu's expression, and immediately his face sunk as he asked in shock. Gu Jingyu's body, which was leaning against the back of the chair, became increasingly stiff. He remained silent. But coincidentally, it also verified Great Elder Gu's guess. Great Elder Gu's face sunk as he shouted sternly, "Don't mess around. There are many women under the heavens, you absolutely cannot touch that lady." But no matter what he said, Gu Jingyu kept his eyes closed, refusing to talk to anyone. Great Elder Gu's frown became even tighter. A pair of gloomy eyes shuttled back and forth between Yiqing Luo and Gu Jingyu. Lil Luo, Dmo Xian didn't know how many times he had called out her name. But the young lady refused to bother about him. Looked like she was really shy. It was true that he was angry out of humiliation. He softened his tone and coaxed gently, "Lil Luo, I haven't seen you for a full 23 days. I miss you. I miss you so much that I'm going crazy. It wasn't easy to return to your side. My entire body is missing you." He was speaking words of love in a serious manner. Amidst the words of love, he did not forget to add a few words to seduce her. This man, It was really infuriating and funny. Yiqing Luo didn't know how to ridicule him. If you continue to ignore me, I will. Seeing that Yiqing Luo still refused to raise her head, a trace of craftiness flashed past Zhou Xian's eyes. The body of the person in his arms stiffened slightly. It seemed to be full of rage. The moment he said something out of line, she looked like she was about to lash out at him. Zhou Xian leaned close to her ear. His low and hoarse voice was mellow like fine wine, intoxicating one's heart. Wife, your husband knows his mistake. Faster see. What the F***ck, this ultimate move was too much of a cheat. Yiqing Luo's fingers instinctively gripped Zhou Xian's collar tightly. Her cheeks turned red with a whoosh under this murmur. She raised her head and stared angrily at him. Who's your wife? Don't mess around. The word call had yet to come out from her mouth. She went into a daze. What she met was the man's pair of shimmering peach blossom eyes, overflowing with brilliant colors, extremely resplendent. His eyes were filled with tenderness, as though he was carrying a pool of peach blossom spring water. Chapter 2589. Have you forgiven your husband? Looking at Yiqing Luo's flushed cheeks, her eyes filled with astonishment as she stared at his face in a daze. That adorable look. A certain man's pride had once again received a huge satisfaction. Yiqing Luo's charming eyes stared at him resentfully, displaying a little girl's coquettish attitude. It's not impossible to forgive you, but at the birthday banquet, stop fooling around. They were the focus of attention. Quite a number of people's gazes were placed on them. Small fights, sweet love, she didn't mind showing it to those people. But if it was too much. She didn't have the hobby of a live broadcast. How would I dare to disobey my wife's orders? Zhou Xian put on an easygoing look, his shimmering peach blossom eyes filled with warmth. Yiqing Luo pouted coquettishly as she stared at him, before shifting her gaze onto the birthday banquet. The moment she lifted her eyes, she met with a pair of jealous and hateful eyes. His gaze was filled with resentment. When Yiqing Luo's gaze met with that gaze, the owner of that pair of eyes then hurriedly averted her gaze as she lowered her head. Miao rong rong. Yiqing Luo raised her brows as her lips curled into an interesting arc. She wasn't surprised that Miao rong rong hated her out of jealousy. If it wasn't for the poison on Miao rong rong restraining her, probably. Miao rong rong had long been the same as Lan Ling Nuo and Xiao Ling Ling, not letting go of any chance to humiliate her. Yiqing Luo touched her chin as she gave a meaningful smile. It could be said that the poison she planted on Miao rong rong had saved the entire Miaogu family. Otherwise, they would have been carried out together with the Northern Wave's royal family. There would definitely be people from the Miaogu family. But apparently Miao rong rong didn't think so. Looking at Miao rong rong's jealous and hateful expression, yet extremely fearful of her, not daring to show it in front of her, Yiqing Luo expressed that it was extremely satisfying. She liked to see the other party being annoyed by her, yet unable to get rid of her. Yiqing Luo's complacency naturally fell into Miao rong rong's eyes. Little slut. Miao rong rong gritted her teeth as she cursed in a low voice. Miao Jingwei, who was at the side, quickly grabbed her arm. Do you want the Miaogu clan to become the current Northern Wave imperial family? Miao rong rong was so infuriated that her face turned red, but she was afraid of Zhou Xian's presence, so she could only suppress all the words in her throat. Rong rong. Miao Yixiong, who had been silent all this while, suddenly spoke up. His gaze was sharp as he stared at Zhou Xian without blinking. Miao rong rong pursed her lips and returned to Miao Yixiong's side, calling out in a low voice, Father. On the surface, the father-daughter relationship between Miao Yixiong and Miao rong rong could be described as a model father-daughter relationship. The father was kind and the daughter was filial and spoiled. However, they all knew very well what the truth was. In the end, they were just using each other. Once the other party no longer had any value to him, they would definitely not hesitate to abandon the other party and seek the greatest benefits for themselves. Do you want Dizun or not? Miao Yixiong's voice was cold, with a hint of determination. Miao rong rong's eyes widened. Father, you mean, if you can become Zhou Xian's woman and make Zhou Xian listen to your orders. Just a mere Yi Luo, nothing to be afraid of. Miao Yixiong's eyes were raging with a storm. His words bewitched Miao rong rong as she was extremely tempted. I want. Miao Rongrong clenched her fists tightly as her gaze shifted onto Zhou Xian. How could she not want such a peerless man? If today the person standing beside Zhou Xian was her. Chapter 2590. Alright then. When the birthday banquet is over, we'll ask for the antidote as an excuse. Miao Yixiong lowered his voice, his eyes cold and sinister. Hearing Miao Yixiong's words, Miao Rongrong's eyes gradually widened as joy and excitement surfaced in her eyes. He kept nodding his head, indicating that he would follow Miao Yixiong's orders. They were all staring at him openly. How could the two of them with their superb perception not sense it? Yiqing Luo frowned slightly as she shot a sideways glance at Miao Rongrong. At this moment, the woman was staring at the two of them with shining eyes. What are the Miao people trying to do this time? Yiqing Luo was extremely unhappy with Miao Rongrong's gaze. Zhou Xian locked her waist as he smiled lightly. No matter if you're unhappy, just bring her back to the West Continent by force. I have plenty of ways to make her help Long Yunzhan suppress the parasite poison. Yiqing Luo rolled her eyes at him. Honey trap. I'll only use this trick on you. He moved closer to her lips. His low and husky voice made her weak all over. The next moment, Zhou Xian's long arm tightened and her delicate body immediately fell into his arms. His handsome face was reflected in her eyes at such a close distance. A honey trap. These three words flashed past Yiqing Luo's mind. She deeply expressed that she really could not resist Zhou Xian's honey trap. Looking at the little woman's bashful look, Zhou Xian couldn't hold back as he lowered his head and gave her a light peck on her pink lips, his fingers sinking into her fine black hair. So Lil Luo, don't worry, I will not attract any rotten peaches flowers. Yiqing Luo expressed. Why did she feel that this man emphasized on the three words rotten peach blossom? Was he hinting at something? The birthday banquet lasted for about 2 hours. The atmosphere in the hall finally eased up. Everyone could feel that Dizun had placed all his attention on the girl. He didn't care about their existence at all. Everyone loosened up. Gradually, some of the more daring people began to let their own daughters go and perform. All kinds of talents, colorful and dazzling. These high-ranking officials and nobles were all thinking the same thing. Since Dizun also needed a woman by his side. Their daughter was definitely prettier than Yi Luo. Although he was not as strong as Yi Luo. However, Dizun was already strong enough. Even if he didn't need his own woman, he still needed to be strong enough to make people's hair stand on end. Women should be as gentle as water, and it was enough for them to accept everything about a man. After those young ladies saw Zhou Xian, their hearts had already fallen onto him. He looked at Yi Luo's face, which could barely be considered delicate and pretty. One by one, the gorgeously dressed young ladies suddenly felt their confidence rising. Yi Luo, who was not particularly good-looking, was doted on by His Majesty. If it was them, the Overlord would definitely pamper them to the heavens. As a result, there was an endless stream of shocking and dazzling talents. However, these people were destined to make the wrong calculation. Because no matter how amazing and dazzling their talents were, from the beginning till the end, Zhou Xian had never shifted his vision away from Yiqing Luo. His gaze seemed to be glued onto Yiqing Luo. He couldn't bear to leave for even a moment. The birthday banquet had turned into a battle of beauty and beauty. Yin Qinghao, who was sitting on the main seat, looked at those young ladies, using the excuse of birthday celebration to perform all kinds of talents in an attempt to seduce the Overlord. Chapter 2591. Her ears were filled with melodious music and the entire hall was bustling with noise and excitement. Yiqing Luo nestled in Zhou Xian's arms, as though she was about to fall asleep in his arms. Until a burst of cheers woke Yiqing Luo up. She lazily opened her eyes and looked towards the center of the hall. The surrounding music had already been replaced by an extremely light and cheerful tune. It was different from the melodious tune which those young ladies danced earlier. It had a hint of exotic flavor. Following that, dancers dressed in dance dresses swayed their waists as they slowly entered the hall. The dancing dresses these dancers wore were also full of exotic charm. Their upper bodies were tightly clinging to their bodies, as though they were wearing a tube-top gold-colored dress. It was extremely short, only reaching to the waist, revealing their tummies. Their lower bodies were wearing the same color-long skirt, reaching to the knee as though a golden flower had bloomed. The outer layer was covered with a layer of golden chiffon, which made their graceful bodies indistinctly visible, extremely seductive. Along with the dancers swaying, their skirts fluttered, looking extremely beautiful. This dance was filled with exotic flavor and was filled with a fresh feeling. Instantly it attracted numerous cheers from the crowd. Just as Yiqing Luo raised her eyes and looked towards the center of the hall, an even louder cheer and cheers resounded throughout the entire hall. She saw a lady dressed in the same style as the dancers, but with a different color descending from the sky. She was dressed in a red dance dress and a red chiffon, which made her beautiful figure appear even more alluring. She held onto the hair of a different race. Her wrists and ankles were all adorned with rings of bright-colored accessories, giving off a crisp tinkling sound. When she saw that bright and beautiful face clearly, Yiqing Luo's entire being awoke. This alluring lady who was dancing in the middle of the hall. Wasn't it Miao Rongrong from the Miaogu family? Such a proud and arrogant lady, was about to take part in the sacred maiden selection. She actually danced in public on this occasion? Yiqing Luo expressed that although she wasn't familiar with Miao Rongrong, but based on her character she knew from her interactions, Miao Rongrong would absolutely not lower herself to perform in front of so many guests. And in such an alluring manner. The dance from the Miao tribe made everyone feel fresh. Furthermore, Miao Rongrong was the eldest daughter of the Miao tribe and the future holy maiden of the Miao tribe. Everyone naturally gave him face. The cheers went on and on. As she was jumping, Yiqing Luo sensed something strange. Miao Rongrong danced gracefully, constantly changing her movements. Then, as he stroked his hair flirtatiously, his gaze was directed directly at her. No, he was looking at Zhou Xian. Yiqing Luo abruptly sat up straight. She narrowed her eyes and stared at Miao Rongrong. Miao Rongrong noticed her gaze. Instead of hiding, she raised her brows in provocation and unscrupulously flashed a coquettish smile at Zhou Xian. Yiqing Luo's eyes widened, her little hand circled around the man's body and pinched his waist fiercely. Is this what you meant by not attracting rotten suitors? Zhou Xian's eyes revealed a puzzled expression, as though he didn't understand the meaning of Yiqing Luo's words. Yiqing Luo raised her head and both her hands pinched Zhou Xian's cheeks. His gaze was fixed on her from beginning to end. This knowledge made the jealousy in Yiqing Luo's heart dissipate a little. But the minute she thought of those women expressing their goodwill to Zhou Xian, she felt extremely uncomfortable. Chapter 2592. Zhou Xian's gaze lingered on Miao Rongrong for a moment. Very quickly he raised his palm and held Yiqing Luo's little hand. Following that, his gaze fell onto Yiqing Luo once again. Seeing Yiqing Luo puffing her cheeks in anger, her brows were filled with an unhappy expression. His lips curled up into a devilish smile. His little Luo was jealous. Jealousy didn't mean that he didn't trust her. It wasn't that he wasn't confident in himself, but because he cared. Because he loved her so deeply. Therefore there was no room for even a speck of sand. Just like how he did not want to see anyone. Xiao missed Lil Luo air. Just like how Lil Luo didn't want anyone to miss him. You're still laughing. Yiqing Luo stared at him angrily as she pinched his face fiercely. Did you see a beauty throwing flirtatious glances at you and fell for her? Zhou Xian allowed her to do whatever she wanted as the smile on his face deepened. He met her resentful eyes and chuckled. No, I'm washing my eyes, he said word by word. His voice was gentle and magnetic. His burning gaze. It was as if it had turned into a soft feather, slowly drifting into her heart. In her heart it was restless. He glanced at Miao Rongrong. He immediately looked at her. He said he was washing his eyes. She had to admit that these 3 words completely pleased her. Her mood instantly became joyful. She arched her eyebrows and snorted. That's more like it. The two of them looked at each other, smiling sweetly. Pink bubbles bubbled in their eyes. Because of Miao Yixiong's words, Miao Rongrong had already treated Zhou Xian as her own man. His actions and gaze were almost completely obvious. She was interested in Dizun. Just now Zhou Xian looked at her. Let her heart, unable to control the crazy beating. Countless young ladies performed. The overlord didn't even bat an eyelid. And the overlord only looked at her. She knew it, with her appearance. With her position in the Miao tribe. The overlord will definitely like her. Yiluo, that slut. How dare he seize her man? But When he thought of the fact that his antidote was still in that slut's hands, she could only suppress the jealousy in her heart. Humph, when the overlord is completely infatuated with her and only belongs to her. Let's see how she's going to deal with that bitch. The dance ended amidst the cheers of the crowd. The surrounding Miao tribe dancers had already retreated. Miao Rongrong was still standing in the field. The breeze fluttered her red dance dress and red chiffon. Her exquisite and well-proportioned body was faintly discernible and extremely alluring. The corners of her mouth curled up into a charming smile. Her hand moved and a white jade wine cup appeared out of nowhere. She swayed her hips and walked towards the first row of seats with graceful steps. The cheers in the surroundings gradually died down. When he realized what Miao Rongrong was going to do, they all held their breaths and watched the scene nervously. Many of the young ladies clutched their handkerchiefs nervously. They were all looking forward to Di Zun's reaction. Sure enough, Miao Rongrong held the wine glass and stopped in front of Zhou Xian. She bent her knees slightly and made a gesture. Her eyes were almost greedily staring at Zhou Xian's peerless face. Her eyes were filled with infatuation. Just thinking that this man was going to belong to her. Her heart couldn't stop pounding. Chapter 2593. Silence. A deathly silence. Silence for a moment. The smile on Miao Rongrong's face froze. She stared at Zhou Xian's side profile. His handsome face was flawless. She took a deep breath and took another step closer. Her body leaned against the long table in front of Zhou Xian. Miao Rongrong stretched out her hand and passed the wine glass in her hand to Zhou Xian. Rongrong is so dedicated in her dance, overlord, can you have a drink with Rongrong? She pinched her voice as she spoke coquettishly. The jade-like fingers and the white jade wine glass matched each other. It accentuated the lady's skin even more. If it was any other man, he would probably not be able to control himself as he grabbed this jade-like hand and bit it into his mouth. This hand stretched over. Just happened to stretch out between Yiqing Luo and Zhou Xian. No matter what, Zhou Xian must have seen this hand. Yiqing Luo's slender brows rose slightly as she smiled at the hand and looked at Miao Rongrong. Between her long and narrow eyes, there was a hint of ridicule and mockery. Miao Rongrong tensed up when she was stared at by Yiqing Luo. She felt chills running down her spine as all her courage was almost crushed. However, she quickly adjusted her mentality. She was going to be the overlord's woman soon. Very soon the overlord would belong to her alone. By then she would make Yi Luo die however she wanted him to die. The viciousness in Miao Rongrong's eyes flashed past. Her red lips rose as she pretended not to see Yiqing Luo. She stared at Zhou Xian and smiled coquettishly. Overlord. Just have a drink with Rongrong. Her coquettish voice dragged the last syllable. Could simply melt one to death. However, Zhou Xian's expression didn't change at all. Looking at the swaying arm in front of him, blocking his intimacy with Yiqing Luo, he frowned slightly. Following that, he stretched out his hand. Miao Rongrong saw him moving and her face lit up as her lips uncontrollably curled upwards. Indeed, the overlord had special feelings for her. Seeing the overlord's hand getting closer to her, Miao Rongrong's body relaxed and became softer, as though she could fall into Zhou Xian's arms any time. However, Zhou Xian's hand skipped over the wine glass that Miao Rongrong handed over and grabbed the two bamboo chopsticks on the table. Bang! With a crisp sound, the porcelain pieces shattered. Ah! Then there was a blood-curdling scream. Miao Rongrong felt a sharp pain in her arm. The wine cup in his hand flew out and shattered into pieces. Miao Rongrong stood rooted to the ground in a daze, one hand supporting her seemingly broken arm, as she looked at Zhou Xian in disbelief. There were two obvious red marks on her fair, jade-like wrist. It was the marks left by the two bamboo chopsticks in Zhou Xian's hands. Zhou Xian casually threw the chopsticks on the ground, as if the chopsticks were contaminated with some germs, extremely disgusted. Then he lazily lifted his peach blossom eyes. His inky black eyes shone with a bloodthirsty light. Zun. Miao Rongrong trembled as he stared at her. Zhou Xian frowned, his thin lips moved slightly and his voice was icy cold. Who are you? Don't disturb me while I coax my wife. The surrounding guests were extremely anxious and looking forward to hearing the overlord's reply. Instantly they couldn't hold it in as they burst out laughing with a pfft sound. The Miao family's eldest young miss obviously stroked her hair coquettishly and threw herself into his arms. And even showed off her flirtatious attitude as though she wanted to take down the overlord. And even took the initiative to toast to the overlord. She self-directed and acted out such a long show. Unexpectedly. Chapter 2594. To put it more accurately, eldest young Miss Miao had been flirting for a while. The overlord didn't even pay any attention. The guests present seemed to have heard the sound of slapping on Miao Rongrong's face. It was extremely ironic. Miao Rongrong's wrist was pinched by those two bamboo chopsticks till she couldn't move at all. Her face was pale as she saw numerous mocking eyes staring at her. She only felt resentful and humiliated. Scram. An icy cold word came out from Zhou Xian's mouth, without the slightest bit of tenderness towards the fairer sex. If it wasn't for the fact that Yiqing Luo still needed Miao Rongrong to suppress the poison for Long Yunzhan, Miao Rongrong would definitely be carried down now. Miao Rongrong's petite body trembled as she bit her lower lip tightly. She gave Yiqing Luo a resentful stare. After that, under Zhou Xian's icy cold gaze, she dejectedly held onto her broken hand and returned to the Miao Gu family's place. Miao Yixiong's face was steely green. The gaze he gave Miao Rongrong seemed as though he wanted to tear her into pieces. Miao Rongrong had always been sought after and pampered since she was young. This was the first time she was rejected by a man in public. Now she was criticized by Miao Yixiong with such a stern gaze. Miao Rongrong felt aggrieved as her eyes turned red instantly. Useless thing. Miao Yixiong frowned as he berated her coldly. Miao Rongrong stared at Miao Yixiong angrily but couldn't find any words to refute. Miao Yixiong gave a cold snort. I've painstakingly raised you to such a good look but you can't even seduce a man and you still have the cheek to cry? Miao Rongrong lowered her head as her hands hung on her thighs as she clenched her fists tightly. Numerous gazes were still desperately looking at Miao Rongrong. Miao Yixiong felt even more embarrassed. If it wasn't for the fact that this was Yin Qinghao's birthday banquet, Miao Yixiong probably would have stood up and left. The atmosphere was extremely awkward and tense. Miao Jingwei looked at the constantly drifting gazes. And at the father and daughter pair who were sulking in silence. He was afraid that this scene would become a laughingstock for everyone. He looked at the Lord Dizun who was whispering something to Yi Luo. He coughed softly and said in a low voice, Clan leader Rongrong, don't be discouraged. In my opinion, the Lord Dizun has feelings for Rongrong. Miao Rongrong's body trembled. She suddenly raised her head and stared at Miao Jingwei with reddened eyes. Miao Yixiong's gaze also shifted to him. Miao Jingwei glanced at Dizun and said, Rongrong is courting Dizun in public. If Dizun accepts it on the spot, won't people laugh at him for being a flirtatious Dizun? He's Dizun. Even if he's a playboy, it's normal for him to have a harem of 3,000 women. Miao Yixiong did not agree with Miao Jingwei's opinion. Yi Luo's looks aren't outstanding. At most, her strength and talent are passable. However, compared to the overlord, her talent is nothing. Why would the overlord like such a girl with no merits? Miao Jingwei continued to analyze. Therefore, Yi Luo must have something that the overlord needs. That's why the overlord would pretend to dote on Yi Luo. Naturally, he wouldn't accept Rongrong's flattery in front of Yi Luo. Miao Yixiong pondered over Miao Jingwei's words. What he said was not unreasonable. Think about it. Just now they offended the royal family of North Lan, Xia Lingling, and Lan Ling Nua. Look at our Rongrong. Isn't it obvious that she's different? Chapter 2595. Right. That's right. If it wasn't for the fact that the overlord had no feelings for Rongrong, he wouldn't let Rongrong off so easily. The expression on Miao Yixiong's face eased up. His lips curled into a smile as he patted Miao Rongrong's shoulder lightly. Good girl, seduce the overlord well and leave the rest to father. I guarantee that the overlord will listen to you only. Miao Rongrong's emotions were also stirred up by Miao Jingwei's words. She sneaked a glance at Zhou Xian's direction. That deep and handsome side profile made her heart tremble violently. She nodded vigorously. In her mind, the image of the overlord hugging her in his arms with a doting gaze appeared. You still dare to say that you don't attract rotten peach blossoms? Yiqing Luo snorted with a displeased look. Zhou Xian's arms circled her waist tightly, It seems that someone has attracted more rotten peach blossoms than me. It seemed that ever since he came back, he had been biting on the words rotten peach blossoms. As though she had really hooked up with a lot of peach blossoms. She rolled her eyes and poked his face with her finger. What rotten peach blossoms do I have? I have already explained the matter regarding Xianxia very clearly. A certain arrogant man gave a light snort. Yiqing Luo. This style, wasn't it a little strange? Overlord, are you trying to ruin your image? A certain overlord expressed that in front of his wife, there was no need for any image. He narrowed his long and narrow peach blossom eyes and suddenly increased his strength, fiercely pushing her into his arms. Yiqing Luo's little face crashed into his hard chest. She hadn't had the chance to express her dissatisfaction. Zhou Xian's displeased low and hoarse voice came into her ears. Are you deliberately hiding it from me, or do you really not know? Yiqing Luo was dumbfounded. Just as she was about to raise her head and ask what he meant, he suddenly lowered his head and opened his mouth to bite her neck. His teeth were a little forceful. She could feel a tingling feeling. Yiqing Luo punched him with her fist in pain. Her gaze went past Zhou Xian's tall body and glanced at a certain figure. Her body suddenly stiffened. You're jealous of that young sect master Gu? Yiqing Luo recalled Zhou Xian's awkward look as she coughed lightly and asked. The teeth that were biting her neck loosened slightly. Immediately after, another round of forceful chewing. Although it was a bite, it was not really a bite. Yiqing Luo could clearly feel the touch of his tongue as it swept past her skin. Her body trembled slightly. She clutched the clothes on the man's back with both hands. This was his tacit agreement. Not far behind Zhou Xian was probably the 10th row. Gu Jingyu's eyes were glued to them without blinking. From afar, Yiqing Luo could see Gu Jingyu's eyes, which were filled with sorrow, unwillingness and pain. As though he was unable to accept the sweet love between her and Zhou Xian. Xian, I didn't hide it, I just forgot. She immediately explained. However, the man who was hugging her tightened his grip on her delicate body and increased the strength of his teeth. Yiqing Luo groaned in pain. She struggled. Xian, I really forgot, stop fooling around. Although Miao Rongrong shared most of the attention, but there were still quite a number of people who were looking at them. He bit her like this. Wouldn't it damage his prestige as an overlord? Zhou Xian refused to let go. Yiqing Luo's struggling temper came. Her little hands pinched hard on his firm waist. The hard muscles felt great. She didn't have the mood to feel it as she gritted her teeth and shouted angrily. I didn't even treat him as a rotten peach blossom. I totally didn't treat him as anything. Why are you still tangling with him for? The man who was hugging her finally loosened his strength. His mouth also moved away from her neck. Yiqing Luo continued to pinch his muscles and refused to let go. Did you bring the vinegar jar with you? If I really brought it with me, he wouldn't be sitting there alive. Zhou Xian gave a cold harumph, totally not intending to conceal his jealousy. He was Zhou Xian's woman. Dared to peep? If it wasn't for the fact that he didn't want to disturb Yin Qinghao's birthday banquet. Chapter 2596. Listening to her own man, her mouth was filled with jealousy. Yiqing Luo hooked one arm around his neck, while the other hand was pinching the muscles on his waist. Immediately, facing Gu Jingyu's gaze, she took the initiative to bend her head and kiss Zhou Xian's lips. Kiss, a light touch. She shifted her body, her little hand slid up along his waist, grabbing his black hair which was hanging on his shoulder. Her fingers hooked lightly, twining his black hair around her fingertips and tugged slightly. Are you satisfied now? She looked at Gu Jingyu and then kissed Zhou Xian, which was to show Gu Jingyu her relationship with Zhou Xian. This action indeed pleased Zhou Xian. His brows rose slightly, the long and narrow arc, demonic and seductive. Mo Yao's peach blossom eyes were dyed with bewitching rays as he gave a low laugh, satisfied. Yiqing Luo rolled her eyes and loosened the mischievous hand on his waist. This man's body seemed to be made of stone. Her fingers were hurting from the pinching. But the man didn't make a sound. She threw herself into Zhou Xian's arms and looked at the performance area in front. Because of Miao Rongrong, everyone also knew about the overlord's love and pampering towards Yi Luo. All of them also dispelled the idea of seducing the overlord. They obediently watched Yin Yanxiu's birthday performance for Yin Qinghao. 10th row seats. Gu Jingyu sat stiffly on his seat. The wine glass in his hand rolled onto the ground. He stared blankly in front at the direction of Yi Luo and the overlord. His heart was torn and burst. He closed his eyes in pain. In his mind, Yi Luo's gaze replaying the scene. As if telling him, "Look, this is my fiancé." The scene where she took the initiative to kiss the overlord. She intentionally kissed him for him to see. She intentionally wanted him to give up. He admitted Yi Luo had done it. His heart was already like dead ashes. The birthday banquet continued for another 2 hours. It was nearing the end. Yin Qinghao passionately invited Zhou Xian, ghost martial artist, and the rest of the Heavenly Academy to stay at Qingyue clan. In another month, it would be the selection for the Holy Maiden of the Miao tribe. There were also many people who were extremely interested in the Miao tribe. They wanted to take the opportunity to watch the Holy Maiden selection in a month's time. Old man Gui Yu let Yan Xiaoyi and the rest attend Yin Qinghao's birthday banquet as representatives. At the same time, they could go to the Miao tribe to gain some experience. Dmo Xian and Yi Qing Luo naturally had no objections. Thus, the group stayed in the Great Pleasure Sect and arranged for guest rooms. Just as Yi Qing Luo and the rest followed housekeeper Yin towards the guest room area. Miao Yixiong led Miao Rongrong forward with a big smile on his face. Faction leader Yin, it's rare for us to leave the Miao tribe, and we're planning to have fun in Qingyue City for a few days. Can you give us 2 rooms? Yin Qinghao's smiling face froze. The surrounding guests who were leaving also looked at the Miao people with disdain. Who didn't know that the Miao tribe had a motive for staying in the Qinyu sect? Obviously, the overlord's attitude towards Miao Rongrong did not dissuade the Miao people. In the eyes of the guests, Miao Yixiong and Miao Rongrong were like a joke. However, Miao Yixiong and Miao Rongrong totally disregarded the surrounding people who were pointing at them, as they looked at Yin Qinghao with smiles on their faces. Yin Qinghao awkwardly looked towards the direction of Dmo Xian and the rest. Those who come are guests. Faction leader Yin, since the Miao tribe leader wants to stay in the Qinyu sect, then let them stay. Yi Qing Luo chuckled as she shot a glance at Miao Yixiong. Chapter 2597. Yin Qinghao looked at Miao Yixiong, who was smiling sincerely and still felt that something was wrong. Anyone could tell that Miao Yixiong had brought Miao Rongrong to the Qingyue sect because of the Dizun. Let them stay. Wouldn't that give them a chance to harass Dizun? It was not easy for him to convince Dizun, Gui Wu and the others to stay in the Qingyue clan. If Miao Yixiong angered Dizun, wouldn't that be venting their anger on him? No matter, even if eldest young Miss Miao wants to seduce my Xian, she doesn't have the capital, so I don't think much of her. Yi Qing Luo said with a smile. Miao Rongrong, who was at the side, heard it very clearly. She was so angry that she almost wanted to retort. Before she could speak, Miao Yixiong grabbed her tightly. Miao Rongrong suppressed her anger, her eyes filled with coldness. Did he have the capital? Yi Luo, that little slut, doesn't have the final say. She was waiting for the overlord to listen only to her. When he only doted on her, she wanted Yi Luo to have a taste of what it felt like to be in pain. Yin Qinghao found it hard to refuse. After all, the Miaogu aristocrat clan's patriarch had personally spoken. He had been afraid of the Dizun and had not dared to agree to it easily. He was also worried that it would affect him. But Yi Qing Luo had an indifferent attitude. He nodded his head and ordered his men to bring the few Miao people to the guest room. But he specially instructed them to separate the courtyards of the Miao people and Yi Qing Luo and the others to the furthest. Yi Qing Luo and the rest were arranged to stay in a courtyard, separated into several small rooms. Although it was called a small room, it was actually not that small. Moreover, the interior design was extremely elegant. It could be seen that this courtyard was usually used to receive important guests. Originally, Yi Qing Luo and Dmo Xian were in 2 separate rooms. But under Dmo Xian's silent gaze, Steward Yin was so frightened that he swallowed back the words he wanted to say to separate them. After that, he arranged for the 2 of them to stay in the most spacious and most elegant husband and wife guest room. Yi Qing Luo expressed. Her clean reputation really no longer existed. Fortunately, the people from the Qinyu sect did not look at them as if they were unmarried and living with a man. It wasn't that he didn't dare. Instead, everyone felt that it was very normal. Because of the way Dizun doted on Yi Luo. She wanted nothing more than to stick to Yi Luo. They should be in the same room. At least Yi Luo was here. There was still someone who could soothe Dizun. The most important thing was, the overlord had already called Yi Luo's name in front of everyone at the banquet. Mother-son. Perhaps Yi Luo had already married His Majesty. Yi Luo might even be the mistress of the imperial palace. Hence, when Yiqing Luo saw this couple's room, some extremely ambiguous, seductive props, he was completely dumbfounded. Weren't these ancient people a little too open-minded? What kind of person did they treat Zhou Xian as? They couldn't handle such a hardcore thing. What's the matter? Zhou Xian asked softly as he saw Yiqing Luo standing motionlessly beside a wooden cabinet. His voice caused the little woman's body to suddenly jump. She quickly turned around and opened her arms. Her cheeks were so red that they seemed to be dripping water. No, nothing. What's behind? Zhou Xian narrowed his peach blossom eyes. Nothing at all. Yiqing Luo coughed violently as her hands hurriedly closed the cabinet. Let's go rest. Zhou Xian was pushed into the inner room by Yiqing Luo. His upper body's weight was almost all on Yiqing Luo's hands. Chapter 2598. Yiqing Luo avoided his gaze and pursed her lips. I'm not nervous. This sound came from the man's nose. It was extremely sexy and flirtatious. Yiqing Luo's hands trembled slightly and almost couldn't control herself. And it was this tremble that gave the man an opportunity. Zhou Xian's large palm suddenly clasped her wrist. Immediately after, her body was like a feather, flying in a circle and trapped in Zhou Xian's arms. She widened her eyes and wanted to struggle. The man's arm seemed to know her movements. He had trapped her in his arms early on. Let me see, what are you trying to hide from me? Zhou Xian carried her and walked towards the wooden cabinet. Yiqing Luo's feet stepped on the ground, gathering all her strength, and refused to move. How could her strength match Zhou Xian? No matter how she tried to stop him, Zhou Xian could easily hold her as they got closer to the wooden cabinet. The closer they got, Yiqing Luo's cheeks were dyed red and the panic in her eyes was even more obvious. The two of them stood in front of the wooden cabinet. He raised his hand and placed it on the cabinet door. The young lady stretched out her hand in panic and grabbed his arm. Xian, let's not be curious. I'm very interested in things that can make you so flustered. Zhou Xian's husky voice whispered in her ear. The deep meaning in his eyes seemed to be mixed with some kind of emotion. His broad palm fiercely hugged her slender waist, pressing her petite body tightly against his. Yiqing Luo's face blushed all the way to her ears. Creak. The cabinet door was opened. It revealed a dazzling array of things inside. What were iron chains, soft whips, silk cloth to cover one's eyes, or bracelets and ankles, as well as a variety of things that made one blush. Zhou Xian's hand slightly stiffened. Yiqing Luo was so embarrassed that she directly stuffed her head into Zhou Xian's arms. She expressed that in the modern era she had seen more various kinds of things than these. At that time her heart was without a ripple. But now, seeing these inferior things, her face was flushed and her heart was racing, unable to control it. Because the person standing beside her was Zhou Xian. You don't want me to see these? Zhou Xian's deep eyes drooped down as he gazed at the young lady in his arms, who was so shy that she didn't even want to raise her head. Yiqing Luo's petite body trembled as she buried her head in his arms. One could see that her fair neck had been tainted with a faint shade of pink. Zhou Xian gave a low chuckle as his fingers tightened around her waist bit by bit. Being shy means that you know what these things are used for. The man's boiling hot body transmitted a scorching heat through his clothes. Yiqing Luo's heart was thumping as it kept trembling. The strength of the man's arms tightened. She could almost feel something pressing against her body. She who had been intimate with Zhou Xian before, how could she not understand the change in Zhou Xian at this moment? Could be said that during the birthday party, Zhou Xian was flirting with her as he responded. Tell me, how do you know? Zhou Xian lowered his head, his scorching breath teasing her skin. Yiqing Luo trembled even more fiercely. I just know. The young lady's sweet voice at this moment had an obvious coquettish tone. It seemed to be able to hook one's soul, emitting a suffocating charm. I know, why don't we try it one by one? Zhou Xian gave a low chuckle as he stretched out his other hand. 5 fingers moved gently on her face. Chapter 2599. The young lady's exquisite face was reflected in the man's burning pupils. The moment this familiar face appeared, Lin Fan's eyes widened. Dmo Xian's body suddenly tensed up. Both hands suddenly clasped her shoulders. Immediately she was carried up by the waist. Yiqing Luo was shocked and felt the man's stronger reaction. Her hands immediately hooked onto Dmo Xian's neck. At the same time, Dmo Xian's kiss landed accurately on her pink lips. This kiss was different from the previous simple touch. It was also different from the previous gentleness. But it was a kind of overbearing kiss, as if he wanted to swallow her into his stomach. Yiqing Luo's mind instantly went blank. Her whole body, almost hanging on Dmo Xian's body weakly, until her back sank into the soft mattress. She then woke up from her dream. Her little hand pushed his chest weakly. Beast. Before she could finish her protest, she was sealed once again. Yiqing Luo couldn't breathe. In the panic, she met Dmo Xian's fiery eyes. His hoarse voice rang beside her ear. Lil Luo, I miss you. All the time I miss you. Miss her almost to the point of going crazy. His voice, his words, his gaze, made Yiqing Luo throw away her armor. Towards his deep feelings. He could never resist. In the end she was eaten up cleanly, not a single residue was left. In the room the temperature was high. Faintly mixed with the young lady's panicked protest. Dmo Xian. Let me say this first, the things in the cupboard we will absolutely not play with. The group of people in the Joy sect had spent 3 days. The few Miao people who had been silent for the past few days finally couldn't hold back and started to take action. This day the group of people set up a few tables outside the courtyard. Yiqing Luo nestled in Dmo Xian's arms, discussing with Yan Shaoyi and the rest about the Heavenly Academy. When Peach heard that, she directly said that she wanted to apply to enter the devil class. Gui Wu, who was sitting at another table, remained silent. No one knew what he was thinking about. Zhou was hugging Kitty Li, whispering something to her from time to time, which was rather sweet. The atmosphere was just right. But for some reason Miao Yi and Xian Gui were sitting in a corner with their heads bowed, looking absent-minded. Especially Miao Yi. Since the end of the birthday banquet he had not been able to lift his spirits. Even if Yiqing Luo took the initiative to talk to her, she didn't get much of a reaction. However, Yiqing Luo could roughly guess the reason. Thus they didn't force Miao Yi to integrate into their atmosphere as soon as possible. While they were chatting, a deep laughter suddenly came from outside the courtyard. Looks like this courtyard is the liveliest. I should have come earlier to join in the fun. Miao Yixiong, who was dressed in the Miao tribe's attire, walked in with a big smile on his face. Miao Rongrong, who had obviously dressed up meticulously, followed behind him. In the corner Miao Yi's body froze. Xian Gui immediately stood up and stood in front of Miao Yi. Miao Yi got up, grabbed Xian Gui's arm and quickly rushed into the room. Yiqing Luo's peripheral vision caught a glimpse of their departing figures as her eyes flashed past an extremely shallow and profound meaning. But she still put her attention on Miao Yixiong and Miao Rongrong, who were obviously here to find trouble. Overlord, Master Gui Wu, young master. Miao Yixiong walked in and greeted the three of them respectfully with a familiar look. Dmo Xian's head was still bowed, his large palm on Yiqing Luo's hair gently. Gui Wu was still in a deep state, maintaining his silence, not even lifting his eyelids. Zhou was still hugging Kitty Li, lowered his head and secretly kissed Kitty Li's face. His eyes were filled with smiles, feeling very satisfied. Chapter 2600. But what kind of person was Miao Yixiong? He had already made up his mind to shamelessly send his daughter to Dmo Xian's side. This bit of awkwardness was nothing to him. Very quickly Miao Yixiong continued with a smile. Rongrong had borrowed Qinyuesek's kitchen to make some snacks and specially sent it over for you to have a taste. Saying that, he took a look behind him. Miao Rongrong was carrying a bamboo basket which was covered with a silk cloth. Swaying her waist, she leisurely walked towards the table where Yiqing Luo and the rest were at. She placed the bamboo basket on the table. When the silk cloth was opened, it was filled with various exquisite fragrant pastries. One look and one smell and it was extremely appetizing. Miao Rongrong was standing beside Dmo Xian. Yiqing Luo could clearly smell the fragrance from Miao Rongrong. It was extremely rich and made one's nose turn red. Overlord, have a taste. These are all made by me personally. A coquettish voice came out from Miao Rongrong's mouth. From the bamboo basket she took out a piece of brightly colored pastry that looked very delicious. She delicately handed it over. These are the special pastries of our Miao tribe. Other than the Miao tribe, no one else knows how to make them. As she said that, Miao Rongrong sent the pastries towards Zhou Xian's mouth. Yan Xiaoyi and the rest widened their eyes as they stared straight at the coquettish Miao Yi. Their hearts were filled with curses. This Miao Rongrong's brain was not working well, right? A few days ago at the birthday banquet, the overlord had already rejected her. Didn't she understand the situation? No. She actually went to seduce the overlord in front of Yiqing Luo. Didn't they see Yiqing Luo nestled in the overlord's arms? These Miao tribe people, were they tired of living and wanted to die early? Just as Miao Rongrong's hand, which was holding the pastries, was about to reach Zhou Xian's mouth, a pause sound was heard. Miao Rongrong's hand was hit by a burst of energy. She cried out in pain as the pastries in her hand fell onto the ground. She held onto her hand and staggered a few steps back. Zhou Xian slowly raised his head. His obsidian peach blossom eyes had a deep luster, as if it was a whirlpool of terror. Miao Rongrong's hand, which had been hit, was in so much pain that she felt wronged. After meeting Zhou Xian's gaze, all the grievances had vanished into thin air. Her heart was beating faster and faster. His eyes were filled with excitement. The overlord was looking at her. The overlord was indeed interested in her. Miao Rongrong was nervous and expectant. Her eyes were filled with emotion as she transmitted her love through her gaze. Following that, they saw Zhou Xian's thin lips moving, only to hear the icy cold words spitting out from his thin lips. Scram. Clean and efficient, without any hesitation. Miao Rongrong's expression froze. Yan Xiaoyi and the rest burst into laughter. He did not give Miao Rongrong any face at all. I say, young Miss Miao, why do you have to make yourself look like a clown and specially come here to perform for us? Yan Xiaoyi laughed and fell into Qiao Jin's arms. Of all people, Miao Rongrong had fallen for Di Zun. In the eyes of the overlord, there were only 3 types of women. A kind of people who were related to Qing Luo. A kind of people who had nothing to do with Qing Luo. A kind of people who had enmity with Qing Luo. Other than Qing Luo, any other woman in front of the overlord would be one of the 3 types. Coincidentally, Miao Rongrong was the 3rd type. However, Miao Rongrong was not aware of it. She just had to court death. The overlord was indeed too awesome. Chapter 2601. Eldest young Miss Miao's broken hand at the birthday banquet has yet to recover, and now she can't wait to extend her hand to be beaten. Yiqing Luo's clear voice had a hint of teasing. Could it be? Eldest young Miss Miao has fallen in love with the pleasure of having her wrist broken? Yan Xiaoyi and the rest laughed even louder when they heard that. Miao Rongrong only felt humiliated as her entire face flushed red. She looked at Yiqing Luo with a gaze filled with deep hatred. But when she turned towards Zhou Xian, it turned into love and grievance. Yiqing Luo naturally saw Miao Rongrong's gaze. She couldn't help but chuckle as her brows revealed a smile, yet not a smile of ridicule. Yiqing Luo expressed that she really didn't understand Miao Rongrong as a person. It had already come to this stage. Miao Rongrong still had the confidence to seduce Zhou Xian again and again, although Yiqing Luo was very assured towards her own man. But there was such an irritating housefly that kept scuttling around her, and even came to harass her from time to time. It was quite annoying. The few of them giggled as they didn't leave any face for the Miao people. Miao Yixiong's expression turned darker. Miao Rongrong's hands clenched into fists as anger surfaced on her face. But very quickly she kept all her emotions. She took a deep breath and changed the expression on her face into a pitiful grievance look. Following that, she held on to her injured hand as she cried pitifully, "Overlord, Rongrong only wanted to let you have a taste of the pastries that Rongrong made personally. These pastries are all made by Rongrong with all my heart, and contain Rongrong's sincerity." Miao Yixiong immediately continued, "That's right, before the sky had even turned bright, Rongrong had already woken up to make pastries for the overlord. From the ingredients to the handwork to the lighting of the fire, Rongrong did all these personally. These are all Rongrong's sincerity towards the overlord." Another burst of laughter came from Yiqing Luo's mouth. She lifted her eyelids lazily as she sneered, Earlier, didn't Miao Yixiong say that these pastries are to have a taste? How did it become specially made for Zhou Xian? Miao Yixiong's face darkened, then he hurriedly explained, It's specially for everyone to try. Good. Yiqing Luo sat up straight in Dmo Xian's arms. Nodding her head in satisfaction, she adjusted the expression on her face to look extremely arrogant and spoiled. I'm very jealous. I can't bear to see other women pestering my Zhou Xian. As she said that, she casually rolled up her fine black hair and leaned into Dmo Xian's embrace. I'm a very cruel person to those little bitches who pester my Zhou Xian. Miss Miao is such a beautiful young lady, don't take things too hard. Miao Rongrong's body trembled. Thinking of Yi Luo's strength as well as the goo poison that Yi Luo had placed in his body, Yi Luo's heart sank. His face gradually turned pale. Miao Yixiong forced a smile and tried to ease the atmosphere. Of course, we all know that His Majesty dotes on Miss Yi. As he spoke. At the same time he emphasized the word, unique pet.